then there must not be a difference between the right and left. All people should unite when it comes to facing Islamofascism that we are seeing.
And a lot of men were waiting to have sex with them. There was one other thing these cases had in common. It was very difficult to avoid noticing that the names of almost all the offenders were Muslim names. And that was really weird because almost every form of sexual offending against children that we know in this country is overwhelmingly white men usually acting on their own. Abuse in the family, in institutions, against boys, against prepubescent girls, online. White. But this was different, and yet each case was being treated as a one-off, totally isolated, no pattern. And that day in the car in the borders, I said to myself, when I get back to Leeds, I'm going to check, and if these 9 men are Muslim names, then finally I've got to get over my fear that this is a story it's impossible to cover because it is the far right's dream story. Innocent white girls, evil, dark-skinned men. How do you cover that?
I noticed something was blowing up on my news feed about this guy named Tommy Robinson getting arrested.
The Tommy Robinson saga.
Tommy Robinson.
A number of people have asked me to do a podcast on Tommy Robinson.
Tommy Robinson.
Tommy's arrest.
Tommy Robinson, a journalist.
The arrest, and I would call it the wrongful imprisonment of Tommy Robinson.
Tommy Robinson.
This is the build-up. They want to remove me, to silence me, to discredit me. They have tried to stop me in every possible way. From taking my finances, to imprison me, to slander me, to linking me to Darren Osborne and extremism. Now they want to take away the final thing I have, my voice.
No, I've never said that.
George, that's the information I've got.
I'm inciting people. I'm inciting people.
His video
How have I incited people?
It hasn't.
This is free speech. This is where we're at. You're not even allowed to. Look at this.
Look how many people.
Man, what you try and hide? Do you know when you do this?
These are normal working men.
More people.
More
people reject the list now than ever. This is ridiculous, lads. Do you feel right you're doing it? I haven't said a word. In fact, someone laid their hand and assaulted me outside court. Other people swore at me and threatened me about my mother, and here I am being arrested for saying nothing.
I'm threatened to behead
I've done nothing.
You've not said anything about
What are they arresting you for, Tommy?
Breach of the peace. Apparently I'm inciting on my video. Can you please, George, get me a solicitor?
Yeah.
Because I'm on a suspended sentence, you see. So
he has actually done nothing wrong. All it would take is for you to go through his video and see he's not. He's even said no innocent until they're proven guilty.
Okay, well, we obviously arrived in Leeds to cover a grooming scandal of 29 men who had groomed hundreds of women. There was no evidence of any reporting restriction on it. We read out simply facts from a reputable, credible newspaper. We read out the allegations. We used the word alleged. There was nothing unlawful at all. We had done all the research beforehand, all of it. It wasn't a contempt of court thing. We weren't releasing information about the case that could jeopardize it or that wasn't already publicly available in the local newspaper. So we just decided to go out there and read out those charges and video the people who were the defendants who were going in. Those people have already had videos taken of them and already had pictures taken of them, so we weren't releasing anything new. The police immediately arrived, 9 of them, walked outside a car, arrested him, took him to a prison, told us that it was for breach of the peace. Very strange, given that it's one man with a phone. We went to the prison cell where he was being kept at. They said he's been released. He's not here anymore. And then we found out that he's been taken to the court. And then the court process started. And for tyrannical law reasons, I can't tell you what happened in that courtroom. It was, I don't know if this is legal or not, but it was minutes long. It was 3 or 4 minutes long in that courtroom. There was no bail. There was no back and forth argument. There was no proper defense. It was minutes. And then He was taken away, gone, straight to prison. No chance of bail, no chance of leaving. That's it, blackout, and then the press couldn't talk about it. The journalists who were in that room closed their notepads as soon as they realized there was a press restriction, and they went home and they didn't talk about it. And that was it. And they thought it was silenced. And that's where we're at now. And now we're in a situation where hundreds of thousands of people in this country are going out and protesting, and they're furious. And people who I never expected to be talking, who are from the left-wing media, are saying that they've never seen anything like this before. They've never seen anger like this before. They're worried about the whole country being burned down. And people have to go to the US, who fortunately have the First Amendment, to read the information about this. They have to go to InfoWars. They have to go to Fox News. And they're losing their minds. Everybody is losing their minds. They can't comprehend that this is happening in a first world democratic country. We've seen news articles completely wiped out. I've spoken to journalists who are really, really keen for information, who have then later said, sorry, we had to pull the whole story. We can't talk about any of this. And it's very, 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 very worrying. There were even journalists, I mean, there's lots of technicalities about what I can and can't talk about. I was in the courtroom when all of this happened. Obviously, there's a reporting restriction. But, you know, when the judge even said that there's a reporting restriction, they closed the books. They wouldn't report on it after that. And it's a very, very, very bizarre situation. Usually reporting restrictions like this are only placed in very, very extreme cases, very, very high profile cases. And there's not really any reasoning for them to do this in this particular scenario, other than so that people don't know that they've done something wrong. Thank God that you guys are reporting it. Thank God InfoWars is making a deal out of it, and I think Fox News have just spoken about it. And that information is going to the UK. Thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of people have been rioting and protesting about this now. They've all been talking about it in the streets, and that information is getting to the general public, despite their attempts to stop it. And so hopefully the ball will just keep rolling, and more people will look to the US to find out information about this. But in this country, the situation, how it feels, going to pick up a copy of the local newspaper, going to look on any articles, there's a complete blackout. We can't see anything. The only people talking about it are people on Twitter. It's actually very strange. You know, it's a massive news story, and it's completely unreported. It's the feeling in this country right now is absolutely bizarre. It's intensified the mistrust in the media.
To shut down all free speech in the UK. Look at this article. Even the lapdog Metro had the headline earlier. Document cam shot, please. Tommy Robertson supporters climb gates of Downing Street after his arrest. Okay, this was at 7:12 p.m. UK time, about an hour and a half ago, 2 hours ago. The very same article, one of the only ones allowed to report on it, talk about communist China, 1 hour later changed to this and is the only story available on Google. Same reporter, same article, just different headline. Tommy Robinson supporter empties can of Stella on top of Downing Street gates, and then they edited the article to take out what happened. Unbelievable. Instead of the archetypal symbol of Ceausescu in Romania and people climbing the gates or climbing the Berlin Wall, no. Or V for Vendetta from fiction. They then turn it into, a can of Stella. They're just drunk hooligans. They're just Brits. Can't listen to them. Their new Islamic masters are here. So again, here's the article that only exists now because I saved it and printed it. That's why I always print everything. People ask why there's stacks of news every day on my desk. And, I've been asked by Comedy Central, is that like a prop to look like you're smart? No, we print everything because you guys change headlines and then edit things and never admit it. Like the old Soviet Union. Tommy Robinson supporters climb gates of Downing Street after his arrest, turns into this, the same writer, Joel Roberts, look at the alchemy, to this. And it even has the same timestamp. He simply reported that they were having, as you know, huge trials on the child kidnapping rings that he had first exposed and been put in prison for. They gave him a sentence for that. Then he's given 13 months commuted. He simply goes and covers they're having a trial. Nothing about the details of the trial, just that there is a trial. That's totally normal under jurisprudence, English common law, Magna Carta, Bill of Rights, Constitution, and your own law. Everybody knows that. They take him to jail for that, and then they order everyone not to talk about it, period, and denotice hundreds of publications. As you said, talking to other members of the press, this is unprecedented, and we have seen thousands hit the streets. Describe what you've witnessed, the level of awakening here. This is beyond the old Soviet Union.
Well, this is very, very different. I've been with Tommy for about a year and a half now. We've gone to lots of protests. We've been to universities. We've been around the UK. But something very different has happened. And that's that people are now absolutely furious about this. There's a electricity almost in the air of people who have completely had enough of all of it. You're right about what you said with people being terrified, and the establishment and our very establishment and our police being terrified about reporting on these grooming gang scandals. We haven't seen press restrictions on any cases with, people like Rolf Harris and all of these big, massive, high-profile cases with white pedophiles and things like that. We have the BBC with helicopters outside their house as soon as there's any accusations. This is completely unprecedented, and people can see straight through it. And you can feel the tension in the air of this country right now. You can cut it with a knife. It's so intense. It's quite scary, actually, seeing where this could go. And obviously, if any harm comes to him, I can predict mass violence across the UK. I can predict towns and cities coming to a standstill. We will not. What's about to happen is a change in a way we have never seen before in this country. Everything is shifting. There are journalists and there are mainstream people. I've met MPs and very, very high-profile people contact me and talk to me and saying that they want to go straight out, guns blazing, and going against this, but they'll probably lose everything. It's torn apart the fabric of the country right now, and everything's sort of fractured. I can't really describe how insane all this is. I was in an LGBT bar the other day, yesterday, and everybody in there was talking about it. You've got fringe groups on the left, gays and transgender people, everybody shaking our hand and talking about it. It's united everybody.
He was arrested in front of 11,000 people who were watching at the time with me. 2.5 million people watched that video in the next hour of that. Yes. What does that tell you? Now the entire world has seen it, except probably the northern province of Iraq.
I got to know Tommy very well. I came from the left. I came from a very high-paying job. My partner was in the BBC, and we moved from that after we met Tommy and went for lunch and became really good friends with him. He told us about the EDL. He told us about the police corruption. He told us about every single time systematically that the police arrested him, raided his house with his wife and children, tried to scare him, intimidate him, tried to throw him under the bus and tried to silence him. And we said, and this is very interesting, we said that this would never happen again in the day of the internet. This would never, ever happen again when information could be freely shared and people would be able to galvanize. And that's what's so terrifying about this case, is because they've done it again and they've almost succeeded, because they've managed to create a media blackout. And what's scary about this right now is that most of the people that I've been talking to, the feeling in the country, the people who know about this case, can't confirm it. They don't really know if he's actually in prison. They kind of know that he's been arrested. They kind of know that maybe it's kind of problematic and maybe he's been taken away, but they can't read any factual report to prove it's happened.
Now, most of the principles of English law are governed by statute, but there are a couple which are governed by tradition. One is the great comment that was made in the 1930s, that law should be that which is deemed to be fair by the man on the Clapham omnibus, deemed to be fair, natural justice, if you will. And of course, the other one is not only must justice be done, justice must be seen to be done. Now, the thing that makes me worried about this Tommy Robinson business, and I've never met the fellow, and I don't know anything about the case, but that's the point. It appears he's been sent to prison for 13 months, and I don't know anything about the case. I don't know what the legal implications are. I don't know what the offence was. I don't know anything about it at all. All I know is what I've seen on social media. And it didn't look to me like he'd done anything wrong, but I don't know. I don't know. And neither do you. So what I'm suggesting is, what is really, really wrong is the judge actually closing down any press comment on this. So the country doesn't know whether Tommy Robinson deserves to go to prison or not. We don't know. How can we make our own judgment on whether justice has been seen to be done, or whether natural justice has been done? And moreover, there is a caveat, is there not, that we have had one man sent to prison for putting a piece of bacon outside a mosque. He was given a year's sentence. It was only about 3 weeks before he was murdered. And another one came a little bit after that, and it was only about a week before he was attacked. Now, what bothers me is, I think we all know, and a lot of my friends in both the police and the prison service tell me that there are some prisons which are run by the inmates, a significant number of whom are natural enemies of Tommy Robinson, whether indeed he is safe or not. And I suspect that he isn't. All these things we don't know, all these things as citizens in a free society, we should be able to make our own judgments on. But we can't, because they've closed down any press freedom on this. I'm 68 years old, you know. I'm just wondering where this country's going. I'm honestly wondering where this country's going. Because it seems to me we're going back to sort of the East Germany of the Soviet Union. No freedom of speech, no freedom at all for the ordinary citizen to express his views, whether they be right, wrong, or indifferent, it doesn't matter. That's the whole point of free speech.
7 years after shelving a potentially explosive story, journalist Andrew Norfolk found his conscience calling him.
As the years went by, I had this very uncomfortable feeling I hadn't done my job. I was on a long weekend. I was driving up to Scotland. I had the radio on. A news item came on the BBC.
Greater Manchester Police have been describing how a 14-year-old girl was forced to endure an absolutely horrifying ordeal after being forced into prostitution. The vulnerable teenager was targeted with vodka and cigarettes after she was spotted wandering the streets before she was made to have sex with a string of men.
At no stage in the report had the names of the defendants been read out. I'm sitting in my car in the middle of nowhere, and I'm thinking, you've not heard a word about this case until 5 minutes ago. And yet, with every fibre of my being, I bet I do know something about those men, because I bet when I check it out, they're going to be Muslim names. So I got back, I looked it up. They were all Muslim names, Muslim men. I sat down that night and I wrote a very long email to the news editor of the Times, saying that I thought there was something really troubling going on here, that it wasn't being acknowledged, and that I needed some time to look into the story to see whether what I thought was a pattern was indeed a pattern.
As Andrew set to work, demonstrations were sweeping across the country, led by the emerging face of the far right, the English Defence League. Its members were young, organised and growing in numbers, and its marches often descended into violence.
Gas grenades were thrown, police vehicles were vandalised, and the police themselves were attacked.
The EDL's goal was to stem the growth of a faith that it believed was corrupting the country. And in the grooming of white children, they saw not just a crime, but evidence of a broader Islamic agenda.
Militant Muslim gangs taking liberties in our towns and cities, taking liberties with non-Muslim youth, non-Muslim girls, raping, pimping, beating, abusing our whole system.
As you can see behind me, there's a massive police presence in Bradford today. Around 300 members of the English Defence League.
The squeamishness of the liberal establishment, and that includes the media, national politicians, police forces, social services, in actually confronting what was going on, left a void, and into that void marched the EDL to spread a completely poisoned, a divisive agenda. It had become quite personal for me. There was a sense of actually reclaiming this story from the wrong agenda, the far right's agenda, and putting it squarely where it should have been all along. We used every bit of software we had to try to look back at every criminal court case that there'd been in recent years in which 2 or more men had been convicted of sexual offences against girls who were aged 12 to 15, where the initial point of contact had been in a public place. Shopping mall, outside a bus station, train station, city centre, outside school gates. We needed to build that picture of all such cases, because if we were going to say what I sense we might be going to say, which is there was a specific pattern here involving men largely of the British Pakistani community committing offences against young white girls, we needed rock-solid evidential base. That trawling process produced cases involving the conviction of 56 men. Of those 56 men, 3 of them were white British men, 53 were Asian names, 50 of the 53 were Muslim names, the vast majority were British Pakistani. This was a process being repeated. It was happening in Birmingham, it was happening in Bradford, it was happening in Manchester, it was happening in Burnley. How had this pattern developed? How had it developed apparently completely unseen by the authorities? How come every single aspect of the British establishment treated every single case that had cropped up as an isolated one-off case with no pattern whatsoever to any of the other cases that were so similar? statistics were there, we needed to start talking to people about it and asking, what's going on here? What do you think? What are you doing about it? What are you not doing about it? We went to police forces, we approached local authorities, we went to specialist charities, government departments. Nobody would speak about this. Nothing to do with the names of the men who were being convicted, but the cases that fitted that model. And we came up in the end with 17 cases since the late 90s, 13 different towns and cities, 56 men convicted. 3 of the 56 were white, 53 were Asian names, 50 of them were Muslim names, and when we looked into each case, the overwhelming majority were Pakistani Muslim. Okay, so we had a kind of evidential base, but what the hell are you going to do about it? We needed to start talking to people, and so I tried to start talking to police forces, to specialists, to experts who look after children, to government departments, and there was a complete wall of silence. All we get, if anything, was a terse statement, you know, ethnicity, culture has absolutely no relevance whatsoever to this pattern of offending. In the end, I found one small charity which worked with the families of victims, and through them I got to know some of the families and to understand that the court cases where people were actually being prosecuted were actually a tiny, tiny minority, because in most cases parents had been trying really hard to get help for their kids. They were going and knocking on doors, they were pleading with social services, with police to do something, and nothing was happening. I was called down to London for my very first ever one-to-one meeting with the editor of the Times. I thought we'd done it, but he said we were going to carry on keeping running stories about this. You're going to carry on writing about this until we're satisfied that every public body in England has the knowledge and systems in place to protect children and prosecute offenders, however long it takes. Well, it took 4 years. We told more individual family stories. One of the very first was from a grandfather who rang from Rotherham, who wanted to talk about his granddaughter. 1 month after her 13th birthday, she'd gone to school and then gone missing, and the school had rung her mum, who'd immediately rung the police, who'd said, "Don't worry, love, she'll turn up as soon as she gets hungry." She didn't turn up that afternoon, that evening, and at 2:30 in the morning, the next morning, a woman on the other side of Rotherham had picked up the phone and dialed 999 because she'd heard a young girl screaming in the house next door. Police had gone round to the house. They found this 13-year-old girl with another young girl. She was almost completely naked, she was blind drunk, and she was with 7 adult Pakistani men. She was drunk and leery. And South Yorkshire Police arrested the 13-year-old girl for being drunk and disorderly. They took her back to the station, put her in the cells, eventually charged her, and she was convicted. They didn't even question the men as to why they were in a house with a 13-year-old girl who was nearly naked in the early hours of the morning. Another early story was about Rochdale, and in the spring of 2012 came the first big court case we covered. By now, this pattern and this story was getting quite a lot of attention, but there were still many days when we were the only newspaper in court. It was a trial that lasted several weeks, and on one of those days, we learned something pretty extraordinary. One of the victims was a girl from Essex, but she'd been put into a children's home in Rotherham, and she was the only resident of that children's home. I'd never heard of solo care children's homes. In 2 months in that home, she'd gone missing 15 times, periods ranging from a day to a fortnight, and on one of those missing nights, she'd been taken to a house, put blind drunk in an upstairs bedroom, and cars had started arriving from all across Greater Manchester. Men were queuing on the stairs and on the landing outside the bedroom. And the jury heard that 50 men had had sex with that girl in one night. She was a child. When I looked into this children's home, it turned out that Rochdale had more than 40 solo care homes, each supposedly offering specialist 24/7 care to one child. Essex County Council was paying more than £250,000 a year to place that child there. We discovered a whole pattern of private care companies, many of them owned by private equity firms, buying very cheap properties in the north and the Midlands. And vulnerable kids were being shipped up from London and the southeast. Private companies were charging extortionate prices. And these kids were being placed, many of them right smack bang in the middle of sex grooming hotspots. That story is just one example of some of the spin-offs that came along the 4 years, but it led to an urgent government review, a significant shake-up of children's home regulations. By now, more and more criminal inquiries were being launched, but I kept coming back to Rotherham because something about what the police had done in that house really troubled me. We told and got to know some families so well in that town, and I got to know the case files, and it just seemed extraordinary that the authorities knew so much and did so little. I couldn't work out if it was just these isolated cases I was hearing about or whether it was something more. And eventually came the big breakthrough for the investigation, without question the most single important day, which was the day I drove to an address somewhere in South Yorkshire. I waited and eventually another car drove up. I opened my boot, the driver opened theirs, and two very large sagging cardboard boxes were transferred from their car to mine. Inside those boxes were hundreds of confidential documents. Internal papers, police intelligence reports, social services case files. Those papers gave us the chance to tell a very detailed and damning story, how for more than a decade, South Yorkshire Police and Rotherham Council had known exactly what was happening. They knew the girls, they knew the names of the men, their nicknames, their home addresses, their car registration numbers, the places they were taking these children, and they had effectively sat back, shrugged their shoulders and done nothing. In my naivety, I thought that when we published that story in September 2012, those at the top of those two organisations would be so shocked and ashamed and horrified that they would immediately announce inquiries to try to get to the bottom of what had happened. Rotherham Council was indeed horrified, and an inquiry was launched, but not into their own failings. All they wanted to know was how we'd got hold of the documents. They'd already tried to get a High Court injunction to block an earlier story. Now they asked the police to launch a criminal inquiry into the leak. They also hired a firm of solicitors to investigate the security breach. As for the police, they not only dismissed all criticism, but publicly accused the Times of exploiting the victims. Those authorities were in complete denial, so we kept digging, and a year later, in August 2013, we published the story that eventually shamed the council into commissioning the independent inquiry, whose report was published in August last year. Rufus was telling you about it. It wasn't just the numbers, 1,400 children, it was the clear evidence the inquiry had found of horrific crimes having been ignored or suppressed by the authorities. As Rufus said, suddenly Rotherham became headline news globally. China, Australia, Canada, you name it. And when I think back to what the editor said to me 4 years ago, we're going to keep on until, the council's chief executive told a parliamentary committee in evidence that the reason the council felt forced to commission that inquiry that ended up having such huge repercussions was because, quote, the Times wouldn't leave us alone. In the outcry that ensued, several senior people lost their jobs. Then the ruling Labour cabinet resigned en masse. Finally, the local authority was found not fit for purpose, and it's now run by a team of government-appointed commissioners. I think this story is an example of why newspapers matter. For years and years, people in that town had been desperately concerned by what was going on. They tried their very best to raise the alarm. Young girls and their families had pleaded with the police. Frontline workers told their bosses. Internal reports were written, seminars held, letters sent to chief constables, MPs, government departments, and absolutely nothing changed. And finally, when all else failed, someone very brave decided in desperation to place their trust in journalism. Those documents I was handed revealed something shameful, something people in power, people whose job it supposedly was to protect children, had chosen to keep safely hidden. It was, for obvious reasons, a very uncomfortable story to put on the front page of a national newspaper, but it was true. And sometimes it really is the uncomfortable truths that are the ones it's most important for journalists to tell, because if we don't, no one else will. On my own, I could have done exactly the same work as I've done these past 5 years, and it would have achieved precisely nothing. I could have posted blogs, I could have stood and shouted on street corners. It wouldn't have changed anything. But this wasn't me alone. This was the Times.
I am Amar Khan, and I am the founder and president of American Friends of Balochistan. We have been suffering under Pakistani military oppression, genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes in 5 different uprisings against the terrorist state of Pakistan. We have been trying to tell the world that Pakistan is a terrorist entity long before 9/11 happened. I had been trying to make the American people aware that Pakistan is not a friend of the West. Pakistan is the person who is like the person who takes the money from the US but sleeps with China. So she has been like that entity for a long time. Pakistan is also the favorite destination for what you call jihad tourism. So you might have seen, you are in the United Kingdom, a significant chunk of global jihadi terrorists, I am very sorry to say, are today in the United Kingdom, and the huge percentage of that is of Pakistan origin. And I do share the concern of the local British people about what is happening in that country. You can see that they come and block your roads to say prayers. You can see that they come and try to enforce their way of life in a society where they are a minority. Now you can imagine what kind of atrocities we are facing, where they are the dominant majority. We are languishing under the boots of the Pakistan military and the ISI. Our people are being killed like as if we were ants and flies. They are violating the human dignity of the Baloch living man and of the Baloch dead. Unimaginable, unconscionable acts of terror against the Baloch individual. The West must rise for us. We have our hope on the West. The West knows human dignity. They have their values. They have their institutions. They have their parliament. They believe in freedom of the individual. It's called the R2P, responsibility to protect.
Why is it we hear so much about Palestine, we hear so much about Rohingya Muslims, but we're not hearing anything about yourselves?
Yeah, the thing is, you'll be surprised. I have a strong Burma connections also. I was born in Rangoon. Okay. So I know a lot about Rohingya. Rohingya, just as I said, in your country, a minority tries to come and dominate their way of life on the majority. That has been happening in Burma for the last many decades. The reason why Rohingya issue is such a big issue is because they have Saudi money behind it, and they have the ISI planning behind it. ISI is involved very deeply in that issue.
ISI is Pakistani intelligence?
ISI is the Pakistani version of the CIA, as they call it. So it is the Foreign Intelligence Service of the Pakistan Army. They have got more than 150,000 agents, including 18,000 agents on the social media who also bother you all the time. I know.
You see that? You see their intelligence?
18,000 paid ones. 18,000 ISI on the Twitter, on Instagram, and on Facebook.
That explains all my trolls.
So now you see they were trying to project you as if you are anti-human, you are as if you are Islamophobic and all that. We have been following that, and when we listened to one of your speech at one of the universities you did about 3 or 4 years ago, that was very moving speech you delivered, and we saw it that the words that you were speaking was coming out from your heart. So when you face fascism, when you face Islamofascism, then there must not be a difference between the right and left. All people should unite when it comes to facing Islamofascism that we are seeing. In your parliament, you have got some people who are more Pakistani than British. What is this nonsense? Why can some of your politicians be more Pakistani than British? This is something ridiculous. And how come, and I'm sometimes very upset, you see, with some of your very liberal people. They try to justify this. They try to say, no, this is all right. This is not all right. When a member of parliament goes in bed with the Pakistani intelligence services, it means they are harming the British national interest. They are putting British lives in jeopardy. They are endangering the lives of Britain's future. Britain might have done something very wrong in the past when it was a colonial power. That doesn't mean that the British today should pay a price for that. Son should never pay a price for the father's sins.
Imam Tweedy is one of the world's leading imams and a highly regarded scholar of the Quran and Islamic history. He's nicknamed the Imam of Peace. He is known for his outspoken and honest discussion of the culture and ideological problems within the religion. I want to sit down with him to learn more about the true history of Islam. Welcome to UK, Imam Tweedy.
Thank you very much, brother.
And for the people who are just watching this who don't know who you are, you have probably become the most famous Imam in the world for people, I'd say, that are on our side of the circle. Do you want to explain to them why that is? Or do you want me to explain why it is?
Well, I'd like you to explain it from your point of view.
I'll say from my point of view, you've become the first religious imam that has come out and said what I think many of the times needs to be said. You talk about taking violent passages out of the scripture. You challenge the scripture. And it's really, because we first had contact when I was leading the English Defence League. And even when we had that contact then, I was surprised, if I'm honest, because I'm leading the biggest street protest movement against Islam at the time. Every Muslim leader was very critical. You wasn't. More so, you sort of reached out at that time, talking openly, yeah.
Indeed. I travelled to Iran, where I was born originally, but we migrated to Australia. I went back to Iran in 2006, and I engaged in my studies. And during my studies, I saw a lot of corruption within the political system of how the Islamic governments control the students and what they study, which at the end leads to missionaries coming to the West from these Islamic governments, being trained and funded. And I was once upon a time one of these missionaries that would be sent around the world to Canada and so on to preach Sharia law, spreading the caliphate under different names, Islamic government and even Sharia courts and so on. When I saw this corruption, I criticized them. I paid a very heavy price, interrogations, prisons. And then
in Iran?
In
you
Iran.
Was in prison in Iran?
Yes.
For challenging it in 2006?
Yes.
Okay, I wasn't aware of that.
And it was actually 2012.
2012, okay.
Yes, in Iran. And I moved to Iraq, and I got involved in a few media projects. And then after I saw that my presence in Iraq is actually silencing a lot of what I can do, I moved out to the West and I started using social media to criticize the corruption.
Okay. And that's when we spoke in 2012.
Yes.
Because even when you spoke to me then, you received backlash. Yeah?
Indeed. And I was very surprised to see your approach, because I knew that there are people that hate Islam and Muslims, but you were approaching the whole situation from a very political perspective, and you were very different from other people. Like even when there were people that would go out and cause violence, I saw you to be a bit more different. You came out on television and you knew what you were talking about.
Yeah.
And that encouraged me to reach out to you. And I think we spoke about terminologies and how you could win a lot of my type of Muslims over by directing the blame onto Wahhabis and Salafis rather than other small minorities.
Yeah, because I gathered very, so you were a Shia.
Yes.
And you said a lot of our problems, which I have many Shias tell me this, but then I have many Sunnis say the opposite. So I have many Shias who would say to me that that what you're angry about is the Salafists, it's the Wahhabists, it's the Saudis. That's what I should be angry about. That's the problems that I see, and that, and that's pretty much, I think, at the time what you was getting at.
Yes, but there were other things that I didn't tell you because I was living within those areas and my communications could be monitored. The Shia also have problems with Hezbollah and the Iranian regime, and we've seen what they've been doing lately. So yeah, I think it's more of terminologies that, if used properly, can actually lead to better results when clashing with them in the media or even on diplomatic level.
You know it was a joke. You're a journalist, you know it was a joke, but you push an agenda which you don't even agree with yourself. Was it a joke? Do you think it was a joke? Why can't you answer that question?
Is this a tough grilling by the EDL?
Why can't? No, it's not the EDL. I left the EDL 5 years ago. But anyway, do you think it was a joke?
Is this a tough grilling by the former leader of the EDL?
Well, is that some sort of dig? Yeah, the former leader of the EDL who had to try and make...
I'm asking you a question.
Okay, yes.
The same as you're asking me a question.
Yes, I'll answer it simply in a yes. Do you think it was a joke? Do you think the video was a joke?
I was covering a court case.
Why don't you just answer the question?
I was covering a court case.
Why can't you answer the question? Why can't you answer the question?
I'm a neutral journalist.
Why can't you answer the question?
Happens in court, I report it.
Okay, I'm asking.
Why did you bring up 6
verbatim.
million Jews when you spoke to him? Why did you try and make him feel bad about the 6 million Jews?
Who are you?
She's another member of the public who's asked you a
I
question.
just saw how you treated him. Sorry, it was very, very rude.
Was it rude?
Yes.
Is that a
very,
crime?
very rude.
So simple. So what?
Is rudeness a crime?
So do you think it was a joke?
Not.
Do you think it was a joke?
Tommy.
Do you think it was a joke?
I'm going to say nothing more to you.
Oh no, you're not. But your silence has answered for all the British public to know.
One thing I want to point out, guys. One thing I want to point out is that whenever the mainstream media have a story on Tommy, they always start it with the former EDL leader Tommy Robinson, but they never explain why he's the former. So I'm going to do that here and share it. I share it with the world because this is the truth. This is the truth the media does not want to spread because it goes against their narrative. The truth is that Tommy left the EDL, which he founded for good reason. He left it because anti-Semitism and neo-Nazi elements were taking over and he could no longer control. This is the man they call a racist. This is the man of principle. This is a man that stands for what is right even when it's unpopular, even amongst his own followers. He will not cower. He is not afraid, and we need to stand with him because if he falls, we fall.
It was from here that Schramm and Walter took their orders. This was the lair of Erich Mielke, East Germany's intelligence czar.
He was someone who was keeping tabs on everybody, and he was also killing people from here, or issuing the orders to have them liquidated, as they say.
Chief of the Stasi for almost the entire 40-year existence of the GDR, from these officers he ran a surveillance agency acknowledged the world round as second to none.
They were the best. This was, as far as anyone can tell, the most thorough surveillance on Earth. 1 in 6 people was informing on their colleagues and friends and neighbours and family.
The Stasi went to extraordinary lengths to spy on just about everyone in East Germany. An extensive filing system, kept with a manic thoroughness, allowed no detail to go unrecorded. Some of the Stasi's methods might have been laughable had the consequences not been so dire. Cameras concealed in birdhouses, in neckties, and in wooden logs.
They made a science of it. They were perfectionising methods of controlling people. And in the beginning, it was the usual methods of imprisoning people or breaking their arms or legs. But later on in the 70s and 80s, it became much more sophisticated, and the main methods of repression were what they so beautifully termed the psychological destruction of a soul. They would destroy one's reputation in the workplace by spreading rumours, having agents spread rumours, or ruin a marriage in the same fashion. Incarcerate someone as mentally ill and keep them on doses of drugs and so on. These are not people who didn't know what they were doing. They were writing doctoral theses on how to destroy a soul.
This is what they do. They make sure that people don't know what their historical rights are in law, and it makes them easier to take away. And of course, what you get then is a very frustrated populace, which we have at the moment, who don't really understand what Tommy Robinson's done. They don't understand what Melanie Shaw has done, and these other people. And as it comes out, people are now beginning to realise just how far down the path to a totalitarian state we've gone.
Incredible. Yeah, there's the article. Child abuse witness held in Peterborough prison, drugged, key whistleblower. Unbelievable.
9 months after the United People of Luton, the English Defence League, many of you may know, it sprung up, it spread like a wildfire across the country. 9 months into the EDL, we had the first demonstration for the Scottish Defence League planned. I've gone to Luton Airport. I'm flying out to Edinburgh. I'm arrested by Special Branch. I'm held by Special Branch on a charge of criminal damage. I'm then taken to a police station. 30 police officers have come from Yorkshire. The crime is criminal damage. You know, on the top of these hotel room doors, the little metal connector. At a hotel that I've stayed in Leeds, £30 criminal damage was done in the hallway to a door. I apparently fitted the description of the man that had done it. So 15 police officers at my wife and kids' house with machine guns, 15 police officers at my mum and dad's house, seized all electrical goods. Their warrant said they could take electrical goods to see if I'd booked the hotel. Yeah? This is what it was all about. They took my dad's 65 years old. This is the third time they're in my parents' house, in my family's house. And this is all pressure. It's all intended to get your family distraught, upset, and it works, because as any of you could imagine you started expressing your political belief against something, and in 3 times your mum's door's been kicked off. Your wife, when I lived in that house when they come with machine guns, my daughter was at the nursery, the lady who ran the nursery was 3 doors up. My wife wouldn't take the kids to nursery again after that. It works. My wife was crying, coming home, crying her eyes out. It works. And it is political. And so this charge of criminal damage, Yorkshire Police had come down. I was due to speak at a demonstration in Bradford about grooming. Grooming at this point was still hidden. The police's tactic was still to hide it. No one knew about it. Yeah? We were talking about it. The police officers that come down from Yorkshire, when they bailed me on the criminal damage charge, they bailed me. My bail conditions were not to contact the EDL, yeah? Not to send an email. These were all bail conditions put in. The bail date was the exact time I had to go to a police station at the exact time we were due to protest in Bradford. Yeah? This had nothing to do with a criminal damage at all. Yeah? This was used as an excuse to get in my house, seize my computers, get intelligence. At the same time, when I come home, my wife said, one police officer spent 6 hours at that file. Yeah? Because their warrant didn't allow them to take paperwork. So instead, what they did is I had files which were all to do with my properties and businesses, where one officer wrote everything down. So I thought, what are they doing then? I was confused with what they're doing now. 3 weeks later, once the demonstration had passed, charges dropped. 3 months later, boom, my door goes in, 6 o'clock in the morning. By this time, I've become publicly known and a target. People want to kill me for what I'm saying, for speaking the truth about Islam. 3 months later, doors go in. I run down. I was quite relieved to see the police because I wasn't sure who it could be. When I saw the police, it was a Luton police officer, and the first thing he said is, "I'm sorry, Stephen." I said, "Don't be sorry. You've got your orders." He said, "We're taking your wife." And you get emotional if you think about it. So they arrested my wife, who was 6 months pregnant at the time. I'm getting now. Sorry, I'm embarrassing. Yeah. She was 6 months pregnant. She went for an 8-hour interview. they arrested me as well. We were arrested on tax evasion and money laundering. My wife sat a 6-hour interview where she was told she was looking at 7 to 8 years in prison. When I come out, she was broken and begging. The cases were from this, they froze my assets. At the time, I had 2 businesses. I had 7 properties. For a young man, I was successful and doing well. My passion was making money. But then the reality for me was it didn't matter how much money we make or how much we want to move into nice areas. The problem will be left to our children for the next generation if we ignore it. What have I done? This is the 4th time of arrests. What have I done? I've started speaking about Islam, that's it. What have we done? What has my wife done? She's done nothing. Now, we were re-bailed. My wife answered bail and so did I every 6 weeks for 3 years. And every time, so waiting all the time for the case, waiting all the time for the charge. They closed our businesses. They put us on a restraining order that meant you're allowed £250 a week to live on. Now, if you spend over that £250 a week, you get 18 months in prison. These orders were brought in to deal with terrorists. They were being put on us for speaking about terrorists. So it's innocent until proven guilty. The Labour government passed these new laws where they didn't need a crime. When they come in to arrest us, they didn't have a crime. They're looking for one. They didn't have a crime. And when I say they went back through, they forensically investigated everything I'd done in my life, going back 10 years. And when that didn't work, they forensically investigated everything my mum and dad had done. Everything my wife had done, everything her brother-in-law had done, everything my cousins had done. They said that I swore outside the football stadium. 2 police officers said I swore. Yeah? I thought, well, that's nothing. Yeah? I was taken to court. I was convicted for swearing outside a football stadium. The headlines in the newspapers were, I was convicted of a football hooligan riot. I was convicted apparently for calling them sheep shaggers. Yeah? Luton were playing Newport, England versus Wales. Yeah? It was a football match. Now, what became apparent when I was prosecuted and convicted, they produced a map. This map showed, which when this goes online, you'll see the map. This map showed where I was and wasn't allowed to enter for the next 3 years. I was not allowed to step in the Muslim community. I'm with my family.
You're going to get arrested.
Why am I going to get arrested? In front of my kids. So you want to arrest me in front of my kids because what?
Listen, you're going to talk yourself into this.
I'm not talking myself into it.
I'm trying to be reasonable.
You're not being reasonable. You're telling me I have to leave the city. Yes. I'm with my family.
Yeah.
Why? Tell me why.
It's already been explained.
No, go on, why?
I'll explain.
You think me and my children are commit violence?
I think there's like to be. Look at the way you're behaving.
Tell me.
Look at the way you're behaving.
Do you know how many people from this country are in? Why have you come up to me?
Pardon?
Why have you come up to me?
You're part of a group.
I'm not part of a group. I'm with my 3 kids. What group am I part of?
You're with a group of people who've been identified as potentially being involved in violence.
Are you for real?
Yes.
My daughter is 5, my son is 7, and my daughter is 9.
You're not setting a very good example.
I think it's a good day for freedom of speech. You've all heard of this. I was getting called a little fascist as I was walking in here. There's protests outside from Unite Against Fascism who, the definition of fascism is trying to stop people who have a difference in opinion of you, which is what I have. So I think they're showing themselves up as fascists. I'd like to thank, I know there's probably been a backlash against the union for inviting me here today. It's been a good day for freedom of speech, but also a bad day. I had a speech prepared that I was going to come here and talk about, everything I had prepared to say. I was visited 4 days ago by probation, and I was warned about my licence. I'm on an early release from custody, so I'm on a licence. And certain things I was going to say would result in me getting recalled back to prison. Now, even though, which I said, obviously I haven't got the same freedom of speech as what everyone else has got then, they said, no, not whilst you're on licence. I think why is a major question. Why was the English Defence League a phenomenon? Why was it born in Luton? Why was it started? What are the reasons that brought it there? I'm going to talk to you about Luton. I was born in 1982. When I was born in 1982, we had 1 mosque. I just want you to understand the demographic of the town. In 2014, we now have 30 mosques. The projected government growth forecast for the Pakistani and Bangladeshi community of Luton by 2030 is to increase by 70 to 77%. This would not be a problem if we didn't experience the problems we see related within the community. At the same time as I talk you through this, I don't want for 1 minute for you to think I'm tarring all Muslims as bad. I'm just giving you a projected view of my life. I want you to understand the stories that have happened. I'll start with my cousin, Jeanette, or my cousin's cousin. She was sexually abused, she was groomed. It's what we now know as grooming. She was raped. She woke up one day, she was found running semi-naked from Bury Park. Bury Park is the area where a lot of the Muslims have congregated and live. It's where these 30 mosques are. She was picked up by prostitutes in the street. Her dad collected her. If I talk about the failures from the police, when the family, I want you to understand and try and picture this as though it's your family relative. When the family were going to the police, when the girl is missing for 2 days, 3 days, yeah, and there is no response, and up until the Rotherham report, people wouldn't believe these stories because they are unbelievable. They would say she's a drug addict because in the end she was a drug addict because she was hooked on heroin that they were giving to her. She would climb out of the bedroom window to get back to them for her fix. The failures everyone now knows from the police force on these issues, but I want to just talk you through. When I was at school, the high school I went to, you had the Muslim playground and you had the non-Muslim playground. That's the same in pretty much every school in Luton. It wasn't divided through racial lines, it's divided through religious lines. We didn't cause that division. My friend at school, I was seeing a girl called Charlotte, she's from a lovely Irish family, and I was 12 years old, and my friend Razwan was seeing her friend Lisa. And I can remember Lisa phoning up Charlotte hysterical because Razwan's family had all gone up to Lisa's house to threaten the family to say that they couldn't see or speak to each other. As a 12-year-old boy, this was a light bulb moment for me to think, what is this about? There was another boy around the corner from where I live called Jamie. He fell in love with an Asian girl at school. He got violently attacked for that. When they went to sixth form, Luton sixth form is the main sixth form in Luton town. I could have gone to sixth form. I got 11 GCSEs, I got an A in maths, 5 Bs, 5 Cs. As a young English lad in the town, to go to that sixth form, I have to be prepared to look at the ground. And I'm not prepared to look at the ground. And that's because there were Pakistani Muslim gangs in that sixth form, extremists in that sixth form. Now, Jamie went to sixth form. His girlfriend went to sixth form, who he's in love with. They couldn't even acknowledge that they knew each other, okay, because of the fear of what would happen. I had another friend, John English, on a night out. I'm just taking you through stories. John English, his girlfriend's name was Akvinder. She was a Sikh actually, but she was from Letchworth. But we were out on a night out in Luton town, and these Muslim lads just come over and spat straight in her face. So these are incidents, and I'm not saying it's all Muslims, I'm just talking, saying there are problems. I've seen them. Anyone who's been murdered by a Muslim gang, you probably don't, I do. Do you know any 15-year-old girls that you know that you've grown up with that have been raped or pimped? You don't. So I don't expect you to understand the issues.
These are all personal issues of yours.
Personal issues in towns and cities like mine that are happening, and they're not happening with the Sikh community, they're not happening with the Jewish community.
And indeed, they're not happening with most Muslims.
No, they're happening within the Islamic community. This is what I'm saying, that it's an Islamic problem. And when I'm just a simple person, so I'm just a normal person, but when I'm looking at, I have to look for where this hatred's coming from.
So are you seriously suggesting there aren't white drug dealers and there aren't white gangs?
Of course I'm not, no.
Or Sikh gangs or any other kind of...
No, I'm not, but I'm saying some of these specific issues are coming from the Islamic community, solely the Islamic community. Terrorists wanting to blow us up, constant hostile activity towards our youth, all these problems, and from sitting back, there's got to be something it's coming from. None of the other communities are spreading it, so we're a symptom of the problem. The English Defence League are
You're claiming that community is spreading it. Actually, what we're talking about
members
here...
of the community.
Yes, exactly, as you could talk about members of the white community doing all sorts of atrocious things.
Yeah, but not racial abuse. I'll talk about Mark Sharp. Mark Sharp was murdered in 1995. Any of you can Google this murder. Yeah? He was my uncle's friend and his son was my age. He was going to get takeaway. He was in his car, a van. He was going to get takeaway when a car braked in front of him. He swerved around it and he gave a hand gesture. He was followed. He didn't know he was being followed. 4 Muslim Pakistanis were in the car. They phoned for reinforcements. More come. He was not aware of this. When he got outside the kebab shop, he come out, his son's with him. They beat him. They hit him so many times, they were hitting him with bats, with poles, with sticks. Read the murder, it will shock you, okay? He was not going down. He would not go down. One of them jumped up in the air with a knife and snapped it off in his forehead. He survived for 3 days, and then he died. Many of his friends, and what I'm trying to envisage and ask you is that you just take yourself, think of this is someone you know in your family, this has happened to. The judge in court said, you can take, if you wish to a verdict of manslaughter, you can take into account the fact that he aggravated them enough to make a young Asian male act in this way. They got 4 years in prison for that, if you want to talk about justice. That's not justice. They were out within 2 years in the town of Luton Town. Most of the people in Newmark and his friends left Luton after that incident. I could stand here all day and talk about other incidents that have gone on. I'm going to show you a video now. I'll ask you to watch.
A series of attacks on the homes of elderly people in Luton are racially motivated. The victims fear the aim is to force them to stand up and move out.
This is the latest attack, a beer keg thrown through the window of a 74-year-old great-grandmother in the middle of the night. It's the 3rd time it's happened. The last was on Christmas Eve.
You can imagine Christmas Eve and somebody putting a brick through your window, how it felt. When everything's supposed to be jolly and happy, you feel down, innit? And they are throwing brick through my window and run. They are cowards.
In the next street, another couple who've been targeted repeatedly.
At night time, I personally can't sleep, and you don't know what next they will do. You wonder sometimes if they're going to put petrol or bomb or something through the letterbox.
And around the corner, this house. It looks unlived in. In fact, it's been home to one couple for 60 years, now so terrorised they won't take down the boards.
Because it always happened between about 1 and 4 o'clock in the morning, and you were really worried, sick, wondering what was going to happen next. Because there weren't just little bits of stones or things, these were real house bricks, lumps of concrete that they'd thrown through the window.
Meanwhile, families are doing what they can to protect themselves.
I am one of the old type, determined black woman. I am not going nowhere. If they don't like me here, they can go. I'm quite happy where I am.
Scared, but most of all angry, they're not moving.
Now, again, maybe take it to the community you live in. You know these people, because I know the Palmers and I know the Howards, yeah? You can imagine eruptions these sort of incidents cause in your community. There was actually 30 people's houses that were attacked at these times. There was 88 attacks before the police acted. The way we see, what we're seeing in the Rotherham report is it shows the police inability, conspiracy with the police and different organisations, social services, where they downplayed it and suppressed it because they didn't want to be deemed as racist, yeah? So crimes went up, they facilitated the rape of a generation of kids for 20 years due to not wanting to be called racist. Similar things, when the police haven't acted, they haven't acted in towns and cities and communities like Luton for incidences like this. That's why, again, what you understand is, I know those families. I remember these times when these things were happening. And if you watch the actual video of the Howards, it was Muslims that offered them support. It was Muslims that offered them help. I'm not painting a picture. All Muslims want them to move out of that community. I'm just want you to understand there are problems in these communities. There's problems that need addressing, they need talking about, okay? So bearing in mind, when they arrested me and my wife, we've been on bail conditions for 3 years. I'm charged. They didn't charge my wife. I'm charged with tax. I'm taken to court. Their whole case of why they've done this, they say I owe them £137,000 tax. That would mean me not paying tax on about £300. I did have a business that was turning over quite a bit of money at the top for those few years. Yeah? It took 20 minutes in court for me to produce, for the evidence to be produced, I owed them not a single penny. Bearing in mind they've closed my businesses. They've destroyed my shop. They've destroyed everything we're doing. And then within 20 minutes we've got not guilty. This tactic of what they wanted to do actually backfired because it made me the most dedicated leader to the English Defence League they would ever get. Because that was what I had then, yeah? And I was angry. I said, if they didn't do this restraint, if they didn't arrest my wife, if this didn't happen, I wouldn't be standing here talking because I never would have been able to continue leading that movement and live a life. But because they took my life, I had the movement left. So it didn't really work. Even for example, I was getting married 2011. The night before the wedding, all the men go for a meal, yeah? All the men meet up. We had a meal booked for 32 people. These are just little things. It may not seem like a lot, but it's anywhere and everywhere you move, they pressured. I booked a restaurant in a place called Billy's in Harpenden. Harpenden is a beautiful little English, wealthy area, yeah? In comparison to Luton. So people from Luton will go to Harpenden for a nice time, yeah, to get away from Luton, yeah? Now, we had a table booked. The afternoon of the thing, I get a phone call saying, sorry, we've cancelled your table, from the owner of the restaurant. So what do you mean you cancelled my table? She said, we've had the police. So I said, look, just wait there, I'm coming to see you. So I went to see her, I walked in and see her, and she said, you? I said, yeah, because I've been going to this restaurant for years. Now, the difference is, in this restaurant, this is a completely, exclusively white town. Yeah? There's no black people. Most of my best friends are black. Right? So people in this town would remember. I've been going there since 17, 18, 19 with my group of friends. So the manager said, you're always in here. I've had the police in here telling me there's loads of far-right racists, troublemakers, and there'll be trouble here. We'll have to have police on duty. I said, I'm coming for a meal. I'm just coming for a meal with all of my family. The night before our wedding. So it didn't work because once she met me and she knew me, my cousin used to work in the venue, so I spoke to her. She allowed us to have the restaurant, but every little place that they could employ a little bit of pressure. And we haven't even started yet on where it goes.
I'm sitting here in a studio in Doha. We are in Qatar. We are arguably in the heart of the Middle East. Therefore, we are in the heart of Islam. Let me just read something to you from the Holy Book, and I want you to react to that, okay? And you can't see me, but I've got a copy of the Quran in front of me. There are parts of a Holy Book that talk about people being persecuted and killed. There are parts of a Holy Book that talk about people all over the world being killed because you are my followers. Another quote from one of the Holy Books in this part of the world talks about people being stoned to death with stones until they die. Another part of a holy book that one can read in this part of the world talks about utterly destroying your enemies, spare them not, but slay both man and woman. When you hear those quotes, what do you think that speaks to?
I'd ask you why you're reading the Old Testament to me.
You've had that before, haven't you?
Simple question.
So,
no, it's a simple question. I'm not stupid. You're sitting quoting verses from the Old Testament, thinking that I'm a moron that would think that's from the Quran. I know the Old Testament and I know the Quran. Now, can I ask you a question? Have you read the Quran?
Yes.
You have?
Yes.
Yeah? So you
in English, not in Arabic, but in English.
In English, are you free, sitting where you are in Doha, to criticise the Prophet Muhammad? Are you free to do that?
Yes, I am. I have had intelligent conversations with my Islamic colleagues on the very same subject.
So you know of the life of Muhammad, yes? You know that he murdered 600 people. You know that he raped. You know that he has... No. People in the Bible is very different to people in the Bible and the messenger of God, who is the most moral compass for every Muslim in the world. And when he is the moral compass for every Muslim in the world, and he married a 6-year-old child called Aisha, and he raped her when she was 9, I have a problem with that. And when people wish to live as Muhammad did in my country, well, you are, no. The country you're sitting in now, people from Israel are not even allowed to enter. So if we want to talk about fascism, the country you're in now, people with Israeli passports. But, okay, is that untrue? Can someone in Qatar leave Islam?
Yes.
Is apostasy punishable?
You don't have to be Islamic to be in Qatar. You can leave the country, you can come into the country if you are Jewish.
A Muslim cannot leave Islam. Is punishable in Qatar. The country that you're talking to me from, the country whose tower I'm sitting in, the country that funds radicalisation worldwide, the country that supports Hamas, and you're sitting there trying to take some moral high ground about issues in the world that relate to Islamic extremism, when the country and the people who are paying your wage are propagating that extremism worldwide. I've come into this building and just had to go through an airport-style scanner, and when I asked why, they said because of the Paris attacks.
Tommy, I do have to move the debate on because I do have to move the debate on. Yes, of course I do. Because otherwise you and I will end up having...
what you're hearing.
No, that's not true, sir. Otherwise you and I will have to have...
tell you the truth.
You and I will have to have a conversation down the pub the next time I'm back in London. Alexander, coming back to you, the imagery...
They then turn it into, a can of Stella. They're just drunk hooligans. They're just Brits. Can't listen to them. Their new Islamic masters are here. So again...
It's worth asking a question. How come the Muslims who don't speak Arabic, other than the Imams, and how come the Muslims who don't speak Arabic completely, and how come non-Muslims, university teachers who have studied Islam and received degrees in Islam, how come they haven't come across this? Why is it that we are now learning about this Bukhari? The answer is very simple. When you go to a Muslim bookstore and you say, can you give me a copy of the Bukhari? You would expect to get this, but instead they will give you this. They'll give you one volume that is made up of Arabic and English. They have cherry-picked and selected for you and translated for you what they want you to read from Sahih al-Bukhari. They do not want you to read everything within Sahih al-Bukhari. As you can see, they have titled it Sahih al-Bukhari, the early years of Islam. And they explain and translate. But this is not al-Bukhari. This is a small compilation from what they want you to know about Bukhari. This is the real Bukhari. Muslims go around the world rioting, killing people, because they believe that their Prophet Muhammad has been insulted. The Prophet Muhammad that I believe in, my version of the Prophet Muhammad, is someone who respects the Jews and loves the Christians and honors the atheist and allows churches and synagogues within his government. The problem with my version of Muhammad is that only a minority follow it. The majority follow a different Muhammad. And when I say majority, I do not mean 5 to 50%. I mean 95% of the Muslims believe in the Muhammad, the Prophet Muhammad portrayed in the Bukhari. Nowhere else. Nowhere else. All books of history refer to the Bukhari. What really is Muhammad like? According to the Bukhari, according to the faith of the Grand Mufti, according to the faith of television celebrities that are Muslim in this country, according to the faith of activists within America, all of these Muslims who go and say that Prophet Muhammad was an environmental activist, a human rights activist, okay, I don't disagree, but is that the Muhammad you believe in? Or are you changing faith every time you're subjected to a question that you cannot answer? So you change faith in order to answer that question. The Prophet Muhammad that the majority of the people speak about and fight for and defend is not the Muhammad they believe in as an ideology. There's a big difference between the Prophet Muhammad in the actual sacred scriptures and the Prophet Muhammad that is portrayed as a prophet to the West by 95% of the Muslims. The Muhammad that is being portrayed in the West is a Muhammad I reject. I do not believe in that prophet. But they do not want that. They want to stick to the Muhammad that they have been brought up listening to. But the sad news is, it's all a fake. The Muhammad Linda Sarsour mentions is not the Muhammad she believes in.
Now, I want you to ask yourselves as well, do you think it's got better or worse? That was years ago. Seriously, do you think it's got better or worse? It hasn't got better, okay? I'm now going to show you a video from 6 months ago. Yeah, just talk me through. Tell me the story.
Okay, well, about 5 years ago, I got rid of my car, and I became more prominent in the streets of Newton. And I started noticing people growling as they would pass me, or people were spitting very close to me in the streets. And after about a few months, I realised actually they're spitting at me. And I faced quite a lot of anger. I faced quite a lot of just aggression from various younger Muslims in the community, simply because I was a Jew, or rather a conspicuous Jew in the college. And one time I was cornered in the college. I was shoved into the corner, and I was made to justify the existence of Israel. Well, I've got post-traumatic stress disorder, and I experienced a lot of panic attacks. You know, so it's, yeah.
You've been living under a barrage of abuse and threats and intimidation for years?
Yes, 5 years now, and you know, it's been coming up for 300 incidents, attacks on me and my home, and it probably wouldn't be so bad if I knew that, you know, maybe the authorities would have my back, but unfortunately they don't. I do think every morning, you know, I'm still here, and I go to bed at night. I live today, you know.
I've seen the image of your property. It's like Fort Knox now.
Yeah. I mean, my friends that I had to stop my friends coming to the house because I couldn't guarantee their safety. So I never have friends at the house. I always meet my friends outside. I can't have family to live with me because it's too dangerous. I live in...
See, this is 2014 in the Borough of London. 2014, do you know what it's like to see a grown man brought to tears? Do you know how many families I meet that are brought to tears in Luton and towns like that? The reason why I'm showing you these videos, I want you to understand this is real life. This is not made up. When we're talking about issues and the reason why we're passionate about these issues, we're not making it up. And at the same time, he's the first to say the vast majority of Muslims are not involved in this in any way. But there is a problem. The reason why I met him, I've been talking to him for 5 years. A lot of people then with the English defence here, they don't go to the police anymore in towns like Luton. They contacted us to talk about the issues, talk about what's happening with their families, how they're feeling persecuted, etc. I went to meet him because he's moving to Israel, because he feels he has to move to Israel if he wants to be safe. His only crime is that he's Jewish and he's living within a Muslim ghetto. And now as we're talking through, we all remember September 11th. I think everyone should remember where they were on September 11th. I was at Luton Airport on my apprenticeship. I remember everything. And then I remember getting a phone call again about Luton Sixth Form from a friend who was at the Sixth Form. That's the age I was at. I was probably 18, going back to then. Saying that Muslims were cheering and celebrating. A lot of these things may sound unbelievable. Yeah? When I then went to my local shops in my estate, I see Magnificent 19 posters across the estate, yeah? Glorifying these people. On the first anniversary, we saw in my hometown of Luton. Imagine this is your town where you live. You've got posters glorifying terrorism.
This is an Islamic jihad attack. The man that done this would have either been radicalised in a prison or he would have been radicalised on the streets of the UK with full knowledge of our government and our security services. They will know who he is. Yeah, mate, I have information that shows there was 4 terrorist attacks last week in France. 4 in France. There was 12 planned last year. Driving your car like this man has done is exactly what the Inspire magazine, which is Al Qaeda's magazine, which was downloaded by 50,000 British Muslims last year. 50,000 British Muslims downloaded a terrorist manual in our country. 50,000, not 10, not 20, 50,000 people who want to see exactly what you see there. That's what they want. They want war, they want death, they want destruction, and we keep on pandering like you just come up to me saying it's got nothing to do with Islam. It's got everything to do with Islam.
Everything to do with Islam.
It's got everything to do with Islam.
I'm simply asking how you
Okay, well, I'm on the reality. This is the reality. The reality is this is a war. These people are waging war on us for time. This has gone on for 1400 years. This is nothing new. And the whole time while this goes on, police leaders or political leaders want to invite more. They want to invite more.
The blood is on the hands of people like you and the left who have allowed these people to come into our country and caused chaos. There are going to be knocks on the door of families tonight saying that their daughters, their mothers and their family have probably been maimed and killed in the streets of our own capital. And the left have allowed it to go unnoticed. And we have people like this laughing hysterically. Is this really a time to laugh? There is a fucking terrorist attack. There is a fucking... Because it's so shocking that you would laugh at something like this. This is a terrorist attack. This is... And this country is being fucked by people like this who think it's hilarious that anybody who criticizes Islam is some fucking scummy, lower class fucking racist.
Yeah, it's the EDL. They're also racist as well as.
It's not the EDL. It's Unite Against Hate. It's a different organisation.
Was it?
Ah, that phrase again. Was it?
EDL were there as well at the start.
No, they weren't.
Were they not? Everyone on EDL.
She doesn't even know who was on the other side of this protest, who was speaking.
Yeah.
Tommy Robinson was there, but he quit the EDL years ago.
Pardon?
Tommy Robinson was there, but he quit the EDL years ago. You don't know who Tommy Robinson is? You're protesting against Tommy Robinson's past organisation, but you don't know who he is. Now this has to be, in the series of interviews we have done of left-wing students, one of the bizarrest things I have heard. She clearly has been given a line to repeat, perhaps by professors at the university, lecturers, and she's there saying that she hates the EDL, but she knows nothing about the EDL. She doesn't even know that Tommy Robinson founded them. She doesn't know who he even is.
Imagine a whole gang of thugs training with communist Islamicists at a mosque, learn from one of their operatives that Tommy Robinson is at a McDonald's with his camera lady, and then they come over and attack the woman to get the camera, viciously start beating her. She fights back, he fights back, and then they run as cowardly scum. And the police are all there and do nothing.
All the way through this, I knew at certain points, with Lucy and with George as well, who are the camera team with us, I knew we'd get attacked at certain times, but I never thought they'd go for Lucy. I guess I thought too highly of them. I thought they had morals. So I always said, and as soon as they turned up and I saw the mask, I basically getting out of the car, I looked across, I see 7 men coming towards me with masks, and then I stood and I tried to move away from Lucy. I thought they'd all go for me. So I thought, that's sound, I'll move away, they'll all come for me. They didn't. They sectioned off. One went to George and one went to Lucy. And then, as you can see, he starts attacking Lucy. He's resting on the floor there. But to be honest, Lucy gave as good as she got. Lucy gave as good as she got, and he ended up, she was kicking him and hitting him. And even at the end, I looked over and even see George, the other camera lad as well, scuffling with them as well. But they were masked up. They were ready to attack us. And as you're right, straight after this, the police have turned up. They've done nothing. No one's even spoke about poor Lucy, really. No one spoke about her. I haven't seen one journalist, no one's contacted her, no media have contacted her. She's violently attacked for being a journalist. They're journalists. But yet every single report from the mainstream media, Tommy Robinson fighting with masked men. No, that's not how it was. Tommy Robinson was getting a burger from McDonald's and his camera girl and his cameraman were violently attacked.
Well, we've known it's this bad for some time now, and me and my friends often say that The day that Richard Spencer got punched was the day when the bar was set very, very low, because we saw how many people celebrated it afterwards, how many people fetishized it. We saw the memes coming out saying, punch a Nazi, it's okay to punch a Nazi. And of course, you know, who's a Nazi? Well, we decide that. So we've realized that it's going to be violent for some time. The most shocking thing, actually, the most upsetting thing was how many people are saying it's fake or it's staged. People seem to think that Tommy has hired these people to come and attack us, which if he had, I think I might have to have a little word with him. But it's funny, quite a lot of people probably think, like to call themselves feminists and like to say that they stand up for women's rights, and yet here's a video of a woman on the floor and oh, it's fake, it's staged, or even better, I've seen some people say that I deserved it, which is very nice. Some of my friends who are quite normal, who have normal parents, who think that everything's fine and the media don't lie, they saw that clip and it actually did make them realise how bad it is. So in a way, you have to be able to show the extremes for people to wake up and realise actually, yes, this is what's happening on the streets, this is what's happening, it's not being reported and it is being celebrated. Because I'm in this world, I know what to expect, we all do, we all know what happens. I've seen Tommy get in trouble before, it's just what happens. But I mean, there is a part of me that does feel sad when I realise that actually no single media outlet has got in touch with me. I've had maybe one friend get in touch with me. This is sort of something that's just going to get brushed under the rug.
Investigation into sexual exploitation in Newcastle. Andrew Norfolk is a Times journalist who uncovered the original scandal in Rotherham. He joins us now from Leeds. And I have to say, hundreds of victims involved in this. How was it that nobody within the community reported exactly what was going on to the police?
There's been a long-standing history of failure to acknowledge, failure to report, failure to tackle in towns and cities, the length and breadth of England. Newcastle was no exception there. It's merely realised what was going on rather later than many other places.
And I spoke to a local councillor earlier who is a Muslim himself. He said, as a Muslim, he has received a lot of abuse for speaking out on this subject. Do you think certain groups are now being blamed for what's gone, even though, of course, it was a minority that's been convicted?
Well, we've gone from a position where in the first years we were reporting about this and suggesting there was a hidden crime pattern that needed to be acknowledged and then tackled. In those early days, every time we wrote about this, we were accused of racism.
There's two reasons. The first one is the one I just said, which is this: because of political correctness, everyone now in a position of authority has been indoctrinated and brainwashed into they mustn't be accused of rape. Racism is actually now the worst thing you can be accused of. It's worse than being a serial killer or a paedophile, because it's like the 21st century equivalent of witchcraft. If you're accused of it, you're guilty till you're guilty, presumed guilty, until you can prove your innocence, and your life can be ruined. It's much better to be a serial killer or a bank robber or something. The penalties are much less. But if you can have your life ruined just because of an accusation like this.
It's an accusation, not even being found.
Exactly. And the people who have had their lives ruined because of these accusations of this crime. And people they've been brainwashed. And I've been reading a book recently called Easy Meat by Patrick McLaughlin, which talks about the long history of this sex slavery, it's called grooming gangs, but it's really sex slavery. And he makes this point that the reason that the local authorities, that the child services and the local authorities, the police wouldn't do anything is because they were terrified of political correctness. And even Jack Straw said something more or less the same, didn't he? So you've got that reason. And I believe the second reason is especially amongst the authorities and the police, they are terrified of violence that might erupt if they actually try to enforce the law.
Eventually, we were ready to publish, and we published that first story in January 2011. The whole of the front page and 4 pages inside. Within a few days, the government had ordered a national inquiry. Within 2 days, Jack Straw, the former Home Secretary, went on Newsnight and said that some young Pakistani men in his Blackburn constituency viewed white girls as easy meat, which created further headlines.
The step forward in Newcastle seems to be that finally everybody who speaks on this subject seems to acknowledge that there is a particular issue with a small subsection of men within the South Asian community, predominantly Pakistani Muslim heritage, and it has to start. The hard questions about this have to start. Now, of course, it's hugely difficult for other members of that community for whom such crimes are abhorrent to feel that they are being somehow tarred with the same brush. It's a community that already feels under siege in many ways for issues such as terrorism, etc. And it's always going to be difficult when such questions are asked against a community that feels demonized. But unless we ask those questions, unless we really try to understand why this pattern has put down such deep and damaging roots across the country, then we will never actually understand why these men think they have a right to treat young girls like that in the way they do. All we will be doing is picking up the pieces when the next case comes along, wherever it's going to be in England, picking up the pieces of damaged lives instead of actually taking the action that will prevent these men doing it in the first place.
Well, staying with that theme then, it has been suggested in the past, hasn't it, that this sense of institutional political correctness has really hampered police investigations. Do you think that is the case with investigations like this?
Well, it is inescapable in a case like the Rotherham scandal. Frontline street workers who were working with girls who were suffering these crimes were reporting to their bosses. They were writing reports, and they were being told to remove the word Asian as a description of the perpetrators. There was a widespread terror among not just police forces, but within local authority social services department, of somehow treading into a cultural minefield. That for too long hampered these crimes being investigated properly. It is a step forward that nobody seems to be denying anymore that there is an issue here.
They're going to bomb Syria this week. We can't live real moral lives. We have a morality we create through our taste. We go, oh, I think that's too much. They shouldn't allow this play to be shown, blah, blah, blah. And we create this kind of faux morality. So, you see people criticising people for stuff. Yeah, she did a video. So I think about Lily Allen, she was in this Grenfell Tower thing, and she did a video like 6 years ago that was demeaning to, and you're like, okay, man, but that's, you've got to understand where those ideas come from. That's a religious idea, the idea that she, isn't pure anymore because she's done something that you disagree with, and that your taste defines what her morality is, and all this different stuff. It's quite a complex psychological soup that's going on there in our society, where we think we have the right to say what's moral and what's immoral, often based on very little information. So in the old days, there'd be an idea that maybe a religious figure, a priest or something, could tell if someone was good or bad, but they'd have to meet them. Like, to go to the stage of here's a few words said by someone, that's the authority of a kind of Mesopotamian god king. They are immoral. They will always be immoral. Lily Allen said something 6 years ago. She's immoral. It's like an incredible level of hubris.
What if you were a bit of a dick 10 years ago, like that? Right. On a medium that people were still finding their way on, and now you are genuinely, you've moved on, your kids, right? And yet the breast tweet is always with you. I mean, it's a sort of dystopian nightmare that you'd always be stuck with your worst joke. Right. You'd be stuck with your lowest, sort of crassest moment.
Well, this came up recently with Bill Maher.
Right.
Bill Maher, there was something that he wrote, I think in 1989.
Right.
Which is insane. I mean, 29 years ago he wrote something, and people used it recently against him. And 29, I don't know how old Bill is. I don't think Bill is even 60. So we're talking about something that he wrote when he was in his 20s. Right. He was a struggling stand-up comedian.
The internet's very good for this, isn't it?
It's amazing.
Because you can dig up everyone. Everyone's screwed up. Sure. Apart from you, apart from yourself.
Of course.
It's we had somebody recently in Britain who everyone wanted to go for suddenly, and they found an article he had written about saying he didn't agree with Holocaust denial laws. Okay, he said he just thought it was a bad idea for free speech. When the internet was for seconds trying to find out other stuff about him, they found an article which said, I'm a Holocaust denier, so, prosecute me, sort of thing, which he isn't a Holocaust denier. It's just nobody bothered to read beneath the headline. And so suddenly, in the middle of the thing where everyone was tearing apart his life, they also said, and he's a Holocaust denier. And that was there. And then like something he wrote 15 years ago, and it wasn't even something he wrote, it's a headline of something. And everyone, again, nobody cares, get on to the next victim, everyone's a Nazi.
Why does people show hatred in you? Because first I didn't know you, that's why I was doing it. Okay. When I knew you, you're a good person, you're not a bad person.
No, it's all right, man. But you, as I said, just get the help you need, because you need help. You need medical help.
The question I always want to ask, among other things, is do you know where this is going to lead? Do you know what it's going to do if you keep breaking down definitions and terms and words? Do you know what happens, for instance, down the road if you keep on saying that Sam Harris and Douglas Murray having a conversation about something is hate speech? Do you know what relief that's going to give other people down the road about what they're going to be able to get away with? This is what's being created all the time at the moment, it seems to me. This idea that you police the discussion along incredibly narrow lines that happen to surround your own comfort zone, and call everything outside it, not just stuff I don't agree with or things that I would argue with or debate with, but hate speech. is just, I think, very, very dangerous down the road. You can see exactly the trail that bit of gunpowder goes to.
I can. Where do you think it goes?
I think it goes to a point where people become cynical about any claims made about anyone. And the likelihood is that if 99 times you've seen Sam Harris, Douglas Murray, Joe Rogan, Jordan Peterson, whoever, called hate speech, then the 100th time that somebody uses the term hate speech might be on somebody who is engaging in hate speech, and all your defenses are going to be down.
This is for you, Tommy. In the name of Allah, the death angel doesn't care if you're big. I will cut your mother. I'll rip, you will eat your mother. I'm telling you, I will kill you and take your merchandise. You better pray 2 rakats, you bloody kuffar. Pray to your Lord, because I will kill you and take your merchandise. If you was me, you'd kill people because you're big. I will stab his tooth, snatch his soul, chew it, and his death will come with my hands.
We're in London and I had to do the police's job, which is what we done yesterday for them. So yesterday morning, I gave the police the man's name, his address, where he lives. That's where he lives over there. Ow. Have you got mental health issues?
Yeah.
Right, so you're talking about killing my kids. How have I found you before the police have found you? How have I got you here before the police have found you? Where are you running to? I'm not going to hurt you. I'm not going to hurt you. You're threatening to murder my children, bruv. I'm not going to hurt you, okay? If I wanted to hurt you, I'd already hurt you.
Okay.
I'm not going to hurt you. You're threatening to murder my children. How do you think, bruv, if you've got mental health issues, you need help, bruv. If that's the case, if you're standing in front of me now, yeah? Are you going to come to my house and hurt my family?
No.
So why are you saying it, kid?
Someone keep brainwashing.
Someone's brainwashing you, and I can tell someone's brainwashing you. Who's brainwashed you?
Ali Dawah.
Ali Dawah's brainwashed you to kill my kids.
I got that from YouTube, actually. Someone said he would kill someone and take his
Take the merchandise, like some Islamic.
Have arm wrestle.
Can you have an arm wrestle? See, mate. Look, listen, bud.
Friendly one.
Friendly one. Look.
Oh my God.
Look. Look, son, I can see. See, I'm meeting you now, and I know there's no danger to my family. Yeah.
Okay, I'll protect you.
You protect me. So Ali Dawah, talk to me. So Ali Dawah brainwashed you.
I watched his videos.
You'll be okay, brother.
Video arm wrestling match, me and you.
Afterwards we will.
We'll have an arm wrestling match afterwards.
Yeah.
You want a little arm wrestle?
1, 2, 3, go. Oh, there you go. See
how strong you are.
He is strong.
There you go.
In 2010, I set up a meeting with Theresa May. Obviously not to meet me. She didn't think she was meeting me. She thought she was meeting one of her constituents. I turned up instead. I bought a laptop with me, and I spent 20 to 25 minutes grilling her. You can read the story because the Daily Mail straight away, she must have some link. It got leaked straight away that EDL leader ambushes Theresa May. Now, when I sat down with her, I explained to her my fears in Luton about Islamic extremism, because that's what they are, they're fears. That scares me. This ideology scares me. I've got 3 young kids. There's different sorts of fears. I've been in some bad situations. I got put in Wood Hill Prison, Category A prison, where 4 Muslims were in there who were in there for 30 years because they were planning to kill and blow us up. Yeah? I've had some very difficult situations, and that's a different sort of fear. Okay, I can deal with that. I can deal with a fear if I walk down the street and 10 Pakistani lads want to come over now. I can deal with that. There's a fear I can't deal with. It's a fear when I look around my town, I look around my country, and I look at my kids, and I get this gut-wrenching fear that will not go away. That's a lot of what drives me. It's a lot. A lot of people say there's a fear, there's a reason why people are doing these things. Now in 2010, I saw Theresa May. I explained to her about Luton Islamic Centre and the imam called Qadir Bask. They're part of my local council, yeah? Luton in Harmony programme. In that documentary, Proud and Prejudiced, that the imam was portrayed as the moderate imam from Luton. I've been on his website, okay? On his website, on the mosque website, it says we should execute homosexuals. A 12-page justification is why women should be lashed for adultery. I knew he was a school teacher. So I warned Theresa May of all this in 2010. 2014, let me play a video of a conversation between me and Qadir. The problem I have is that, can you blame us when we're seeing this? Then when we see a moderate imam put forward, Luton has 30 mosques, only 1 Salafi, 1 Wahhabi, yeah? Who's the face all the time? Who's the representative that the council go to, the newspapers go to, the TV go to get their view on everything? The Salafi mosque, the Salafi imam. He has been empowered by my council to be the face, and he's not representative of the majority of Muslims in Luton, but that's what we see. Now, when I left the English Defence League, who did the radio station go straight to? Again, Qadir Bask, the moderate imam.
As I was talking about Tommy Robinson, asking your questions about him, he came knocking on our door, and now he's sitting here in the studio with us. He's joined in the studio now by Kadir Batch from the Luton Islamic Centre, who we had as an arranged guest on this subject as well. So we've ended up having a bit of a Barney about all of this. And just before the news, Kadir, you said that in an ideal society there would be punishments for example, homosexuals. And Tommy Robinson had put the point to you that this is why he was concerned by your ideology, which is why he was anti-Islamic and anti-Islamization and put Luton Islamic Centre in that camp. Do you understand why Tommy Robinson might be concerned by Islamic ideology when, even though you say we don't want it in Britain, you do use phrases like in an ideal society and then come up with a statement like that?
Yeah, that's fair enough. He has every right to disagree and to criticise. Yeah, because look, you can look at how the Sharia is established in Saudi Arabia, for example. Do the people fear the Sharia? They don't fear it. Actually, you haven't said that. Sometimes from the things that people fear is what keeps society in order. Like, you fear going to prison, so you do not commit a crime. It's similarly like that. It's a deterrent. The Sharia rules are deterrents. They're not implemented. How many hands get chopped off? How many women get lashed? And it just doesn't happen. Very, very, very few. So 40. I mean, in an ideal Islamic society, these laws do not get implemented. They're just deterrents.
Okay. Final question for Mr. Robinson. Then we have some calls, and I want you to talk to our listeners.
What Kadir's saying is that gays should be too scared to be gay. I have a problem when this man is a representative of the Muslim community in my town. I have a problem. I have a problem when I first met him. I called a meeting with him. I went to meet him. It's because all these tensions were in the town, and he's the main face. He's the main person I fought to see. When he walked in, he said, Tommy, Sharia law will not come to this country in your lifetime. Probably not your sons, but the generation after that. I said, thank you for concreting why I'm resisting this, Kadir. There's another quick video.
Non-Muslim youth, non-Muslim girls, raping, pimping, beating, abusing our whole system. Rather than deal with these gangs, they would rather persecute us, the people who are highlighting the issue. And the fact is, the police, the councils, the government, everyone needs to wake up.
Many of the issues when we formed the EDL that I wanted to raise and wanted to bring to the surface have been brought to the surface. Many of them. If you wish to, you can draw a graph on the arrests. Do it yourself. Look at the arrest rate for Muslim grooming gangs, which is a big problem in many of our communities. You'll see a line go straight across like this. English Defence League forms, the arrests go through the roof. Only when people took to the streets. Only when they could not hide this fact any longer because they've hid it. Only when the world's media were listening to us talk about what's happening to our family members and the police have facilitated it, did they do anything about it. If I tell you one story, I stayed in Blackburn for the night before a demonstration. I spent the time with a family. I listened to horrific stories of what's happening to their 12-year-old daughter. She's going missing as well for days. She's got a 19-year-old brother in that room that's telling me the stories. I mean, horrific. When you hear these stories and you're having to listen to all these things that are going on, it's going on everywhere. The next day we're at the demonstration, it's all kicking off. I've gone down to the front where it's kicking off to try and calm people down. Who's at the front kicking off with the police? Her brother. There's usually a lot of reason for the anger that people are seeing, okay? To just label it and ignore it. The main reason I want to get across is why.
The BBC makes a documentary called Three Girls, about three of the girls who suffered from these rape gangs. And then a man in Wales sees it and gets so enraged, people say at the local pub he was railing against the bloody Muslims and all this sort of thing. And then he hires a van and drives into a crowd of people outside a mosque. And you have this awful feeling that the BBC didn't want to deal with the issue that the programme was about for years because it was so awful and ugly and sounded like something made up by some kind of nativist, racist, so it said everything. And then they do. And then it turns out a member of the public sees it and drives a van into a crowd. This sort of couldn't get more complex in a way. So, and I thought after that, okay, maybe the BBC were right. Maybe they should cover up the gang rape of 1,500 girls. Maybe the public can't cope with it. Maybe they will get into vans. Now, as it happens, I know the British public, I think, fairly well. And I think that guy in Wales is a very, very unusual figure. I don't think it's very common. I don't think everyone's going to do that. I don't think we're all like that. Wicked, mad. But I don't know. I mean, I don't know for sure everywhere. I don't know what happened in this country or in various other countries if there were 3 attacks like that in quick succession. I don't know. But this is really, this is going to get complex. But it seems to be the only way around this is to not give in to that and to try just to publish the facts when they happen. Because it's just obviously seems to be much worse. We always know in political scandal what's worse, the cover-up. It's always the cover-up. Right. And that may be the case with all this. Maybe the argument for just the papers explaining stuff that's happened is maybe that's all they can do, and that one can just say to them it'd be a lot worse if you bottle this up, because otherwise people will get the idea that there is some conspiracy to cover over certain stories, and they'll be onto something.
And in fact, if you think about the millions of people that must have seen the story on the rape of 1,500, the fact that only one person responded that way is pretty extraordinary in and of itself.
Yes. I would have thought on some of this. I mean, I don't know. Again, I mean, there are lots of examples one could use, but when something bad happens, like the Manchester Arena attack, I'm amazed in a way that people are so decent. I mean, I'm so pleased they are, but we don't go out looking for people to attack. The public, certainly in Britain, I can happily say, I think it's the same in America, the public, we're not really lynch mobs waiting to be got going again. But the expectation that we are is the only possibility of creating us in such a way. It's only by treating us as if we can't deal with ugly things that go on that you could see the situation. That's where we began, to see the situation in which that all goes wrong in that different way.
The whole culture of tech today is such a progressive thought bubble. It's an echo chamber, and it's very, very, like I said, it's better that they're really progressive and open-minded and left-wing than radical right-wing. I think it's better.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, if by radical right-wing you mean, kind of neo-Nazi, racist or something. Yeah, of course. Although these people have, as I say, all the ability to create those people. So, I had a friend who, a lot of friends involved in the Northern Ireland conflict many years ago in the UK, not that many years ago. One writer had a beautiful phrase about it, where you got to a stage where everyone was killing everyone. He said, you also got to the stage where truth was whatever you were having yourself. And we're not far away from that place where I say what you call is hate speech, you say what I say is hate speech, let's call the whole thing off. We're not very far away from there, actually.
For too long in this country, we, media, the establishment, society, the chattering classes, the liberal elite, whatever term you want to use, have ignored the issue of grooming gangs, of young, vulnerable teenage girls who have been victimized, drugged and raped and abused. Whether it's the Rotherham case or all the other cases that were replicated across the country, it is both the conclusion of the prosecutor in the Rotherham case, British Pakistani Muslim Nazir Afzal, or indeed the official inquiry into why it took so long for these young, vulnerable, underage girls to get justice. Both of those concluded that fears of racism prevented us from coming to the defense of vulnerable underage girls. Fears of racism meaning that the state was scared that it would be accused of being racist if it rightly arrested and prosecuted British Pakistani, largely British Pakistani Muslim men in their abuse of underage white teenage girls. And so from fear of appearing racist, there was a silence across the country as multiple cases of grooming gangs emerged up and down the country, as evidenced now due to multiple prosecutions, successful prosecutions, but sadly and unfortunately too late. If we hadn't all been silent, if we had all addressed this issue head on when it needed to be addressed, when it was time to address it, then the void would not have emerged for the populist agitators to fill that gap and become popular, actually, as a result of addressing what is a legitimate issue. They ended up hijacking what should have been the concern of every right-minded citizen in this country.
Which
and
is
empower.
Empower them, which is something you don't want actual racists and Nazis to have legitimate grievance claims, and you don't want them to be able to disguise themselves as something they're not.
And unfortunately, it takes a bit of courage to address something that people will hurl abuse at you for talking about. I know on this show, on my own show on the weekends, I've tried to book certain MPs to come on and address the issue of grooming gangs, and on multiple times they've had to back away from fear of the backlash. We recall Sarah Champion, who in the Labour Party attempted to address this and lost her position in the front bench as a result. There have been multiple cases now, and it's beyond any level of doubt that there's a disproportionate number of British Muslims involved in grooming gangs against underage white girls. And to say that is to report on the facts. It's not to be racist. And if we're backing away from this conversation, then all we're doing is leaving the ground far open in what is a legitimate issue that requires addressing. We're leaving the ground for the populists to hijack that legitimate issue and make it their own for their own nefarious purposes. And that's precisely what's been going on. And it's in that regard that what I'm saying here is I wish that those young girls had seen justice served for them as fast as the judge served Tommy Robinson justice in this case. Because in this case, it's very easy for us to pick on the bogeyman. But actually the truth is that our silence over decades in this country is the real bogeyman. And that's the real thing we should despise, our own cowardice in the face of grooming of young girls up and down this country and our conspiracy of silence.
Now you see they were trying to project you as if you are anti-human, you are as if you are Islamophobic and all that. We have been following that, and when we listened to one of your speech at one of the universities you did about 3 or 4 years ago, that was very moving speech you delivered, and we saw it that the words that you were speaking was coming out from your heart. So when you face fascism, when you face Islamofascism, then there must not be a difference between the right and left. All people should unite when it comes to facing Islamofascism that we are
Another
seeing.
point I'll make to you about prison. I've been in prison. Wood Hill is an ISIS training camp. That's it. Our category A jails now are radicalising and radicalising. We've got 800 coming out a year. When you go to jail, you're weak, you're vulnerable. You're now being turned to hate the system, hate the country, hate everything about us. And I'll make this claim now. At some time, this speech will be looked back upon after a prison convert has come out, maimed, killed and murdered on our streets, because it's going to happen. There's nothing being done. They're not segregated, they're not isolated. In 2012, I spent 20 weeks on solitary confinement. These terrorists are not on solitary confinement. They're on the wings, converting, making people take the Shahada, converting them. The imams, even in Wood Hill, are trying to do something. They're not trusted, they're not listened to. They're seen as stooges.
The non-Muslim community, when they look at me, they say, okay, he's a right wing. There's no such thing as right wing. We're dealing with terrorism.
I agree.
If you criticize ISIS, it doesn't mean you have a political stance. It means you have a humanitarian stance. You're a human being that is against butchering other human beings. So the left attacked me for a very long time, constantly, day after day after day, article after interview on radio. Every day I was being attacked in Australia. And then they came to
left
realize,
attack you?
yes.
The left attack you. You're a Muslim imam coming
And the
out
left-
speaking against terrorism.
The left are the real bigots, not the right. The left are the real racist bigots. It is them. The left, whenever they see a moderate Muslim or a peaceful Muslim who criticizes the majority of texts, they come and they say, oh no, a Muslim can't be like that. A Muslim is like Anjem Chaudhry. A real Muslim is like these radicals. So this guy must be a fake. Bash him. And what do we do about the radicals? Understand and tolerate. They are the real bigots who in their minds believe that a real Muslim can't be a moderate. And this is what I first-hand experience.
You've experienced that from the left.
I call myself a peaceful man. Oh no, you're criticizing this book that calls for beheading people. So what do you want me to do? I want the Bukhari completely banned from universities. Why should it be used as a source for writing a thesis?
I ended up getting imprisoned and I spent 22 weeks on solitary confinement because my life had gone so chaotic. I was neglecting my family. I was English Defence League, English Defence League, English Defence League. That's it. Okay? And then I had a chance and a time to think about the effect it was having, where we were going, what we were doing. The movement changed on the outside whilst I was in prison. I'd fought for years to keep far right elements out. They were welcomed back in. I then had a time to evaluate. I'd made a decision during that prison sentence. And the reason why I talk about this prison sentence is because to get around their laws, because you're only allowed to spend 28 days in solitary confinement because of your mental health issues. Yeah? What they did is every 28 days they moved me from one solitary confinement prison to another. So I went from Wandsworth to Bedford, Bedford to Wood Hill, Wood Hill to Wandsworth, Wandsworth to Wayland, to get around the laws for what they were doing. My family contacted human rights lawyers. They explained, listen, our son has spent 12 weeks in solitary confinement, listed all the things. All the human rights lawyers were like, this, you've definitely got a case, this is out of order, we'll get a judicial review. Yeah, he's the leader of the English Defence League. Whoa. I mean, we can't represent him. That's how toxic it's become. That's how powerful political correctness is. My family then looked for who represented Jamie Bulger's killer. Child killer. Cut off the penis of a child and fed it to him. Disgusting, sick. They contacted him. Went through the same scenario, explained the situation, got to the fact that I was a leader of the English Defence League. Whoa, can't touch him. He represented a child killer. He would not represent me. That is how toxic it had become to speak out and be critical of what I've seen. Now, we tried to get ASBOs. We did contact the council before any street protests. I'm not going to stand here and pretend I'm an angel, because I'm far from it. I'm not going to stand here and defend the actions of every English Defence League demonstration either, because some of them are indefendable, and I wouldn't want to anyway. What I would also point out, ISIS. Many ISIS fighters for ISIS, there's a lad I know from Luton who's out there fighting for him. They're coming back. I draw the point. They are following from scripture from the Quran. They practice from the same Quran that the Kurds who are fighting for freedom also follow. So I'm not saying all Muslims are bad. I'm saying what I've tried to do today and what I'm trying to paint a picture of is why. I want you to understand why. Because they've got no evidence on me. I'm walking on this case, yeah? But they've got little stupid bits of evidence for tax and irregularities against 5 or 6 of my family. Yeah? So I know the whole time, which I kept saying to my family, when I get to court, this isn't about you, it's about me. Yeah? I'm getting offered a deal, I know I am. So, and again, my views are my views. They're not my wife's views. They're generally not my wife's views. She despises it. So I get to court. I say to my wife, I walk into court, I'm offered a deal. Plead guilty to these charges, we drop the family. Yeah? The charges they wanted me to plead guilty to would have resulted in 5 years in prison. And again, all of this is documented through documentary makers, which will be coming out soon, is I walk outside and I ring my wife. I say, look, I've been offered a deal, I'm getting 5 years, but don't worry, everything's dropped against you, blah, blah, blah. My wife's crying hysterically, saying, please don't, 5 years is too long. Bearing in mind, we know I haven't done it. We know what this is all just all fabricated in order to get in a position. So I go back in and refuse the deal. I say, I'm not taking the deal, because 5 years is a long time as well. It's a long effect on my kids, and at the time I'm weighing it all up. They then swear the jury in. They swear 3 Muslims in on my jury. 1 PCSO. So I'm sitting there thinking, how can you have a PCSO as my jury? 1 PCSO. I'm ready to go through the trial. Just before the trial stops, they stop it. Stop. They come out again. Because bearing in mind, they can't have me getting a not guilty. Because if I get a not guilty for everything they've just done, everything they've fabricated, I'd be able to destroy them, what they've done. Yeah? So they offer me a deal again. Now this deal, first thing I say to the solicitor, what's the maximum I can get? Maximum I can do. It's at 18 months. I weighed up 18 months means serving 6 months in prison. I'm taking that straight away, and they're leaving everyone else. So I said, give me an agreement. I want it in writing. When this goes online, you'll see all the written agreement. Yeah? The written agreement was, we will drop the case against your wife. We will drop the case against Neil, which was another relation. We will drop the case. We will not take proceeds of crime, which means all the assets I've had frozen, my properties, will be released back to me. Now, I took that deal, so I went to jail. I got 18 months. Bearing in mind, what the crime was that my brother-in-law filled a mortgage form out wrong. The mortgage company didn't lose no money. No one lost no money. I'm then taken to Wood Hill Maximum Security Prison. That's one of the worst prisons in the UK, where it houses some of the country's most prolific Muslim terrorist extremists. I'm took there for this. Someone's filled their form out. As soon as I get there, the difference is that when I was in there in 2011, 2012, when I was in there on solitary confinement, as I've said, they locked the whole prison to get me made to be. This time, I'm just put straight on the first night set. So straight away I'm thinking, well, I'm going to get killed here. The door opens, it's a Royal Marine, an ex-Royal Marine who's now a prison officer. And he said, when we come to get you, do not leave this cell. Your life depends on it. I went, all right. Shut the door. Half hour later, my door opens. He's there with 2 other men. You're going B-Wing. I said, I'm not going anywhere. He stepped straight in. If you don't go, I'm going to arrest you. So he was giving me a way out. I said, arrest me. He arrested me, took me straight to the way you get arrested. You go to the block. Took me straight to the block. When he's talking to me, he said, you know where they were taking you? I said, where? He said, you know the 6 that are in for planning to kill you? They've got 30 years. I said, yeah. He goes, they're putting you with them. He goes, Rach, I got the name. I think I put the name in my book. The woman because I checked who made the decisions afterwards. The woman who made that security decision to put me there, like even that screw that told me, he said she'd have been done for corporal manslaughter. Yeah, she would have got done because you'd have got killed. But you're dead then. Yeah? So there's no help.
The thing that's happened with Grenfell Tower. I mean, we got a corporate manslaughter law brought in 2007, right? But it's very difficult to convict an individual of corporate manslaughter. Almost every corporate manslaughter charge is just a fine that's made to a company. I mean, they've deliberately structured that law in a way that when things like this happen, they aren't accountable.
So the next day my solicitor's come to see me. This is in the prison. So I've gone to see the solicitor. I've sat down with my solicitor. Afterwards, there's a waiting room like this. The door's open on the waiting room. I've seen the beards straight away. I got locked in the room. I got locked in the room and violently beaten up and battered. The Sun newspaper had run a headline saying, like it was funny, Tommy gets done. Tommy gets done. And it was Muslim. So I lost my teeth. I was beaten up. And they're supposed to be. That cannot happen. There has to be a duty of care in prisons for prisoners. You're not allowed to put, if someone's from one gang and someone's from another gang, they're not allowed to be near each other. Yeah, that's what they do. You're putting me, the most prolific and hated man from Muslim terrorists, because I've committed blasphemy and criticised their prophet, and you're giving me on a plate to them. The only thing that I was lucky was that I could tell by the Muslims, when they locked me in the room with them, they didn't know I was coming in. Because their faces looked like, oh my God, he's in the room with us. Yeah? And then it just went off. But if they'd have known I was going to be in that room, they'd have had chivs, they'd have had blaze, they'd have been waiting, and I wouldn't be here. Yeah? But someone pulled strings to do that. Someone pulled strings to put me on B-Wing. Someone pulled strings the next day to put me in there. It can't be explained, and I'll get onto other prison sentences where exactly the same happened.
I was highlighting the grooming, which many police have dirty hands over, because they facilitated it and allowed it. So there's many different reasons why I think that is, but I think that the main reason why they're trying to put me back in a prison cell now, because they know I'll get attacked. They know. I think many of them will be scratching their heads as to how I'm here still now, with what they've done. They've set it up so many times for me to be openly attacked, but I've managed to survive it. And unfortunately, I'll have another rerun in a little while. But I'm under no illusions that it's been done on purpose. It has to have been. For all the things to have happened, for them to go out their way to house me with Muslim murderers or terrorists, it has to have been. Of all the places in the UK they could have put me in prison, they put me there. If they murdered me, and there was a couple of years there, I was convinced if they murdered me, it'd be the final mistake for them in the UK. I thought it would cause such an uprising, such a street uprising, that it would be the end for Islam, the dominance it has in the UK. And I'd give anything for that. For my kids to grow up in a free society, I'd give anything, but I convinced myself that. And then when Lee Rigby was brutally beheaded, and there was no uprising, and there wasn't really anything, people just moaned about it for a couple of days and then went back to work. I then saw reality that actually, I don't think it would. But there will come, I kept asking myself, there will define a moment in history where things will change. Something will happen where things will change. Europe will rise up. It's just knowing what it is and when it is, because we've seen soldiers beheaded, we see terrorist atrocities, and straight after Lee Rigby was beheaded, our deputy prime minister comes straight on the news and said, in the Quran, it says, if you kill one man, you kill all of humanity. This has no link to Islam. What he didn't say was that the following verse from that actually says, unless you cause mischief, and then you can be executed. The exact phrase that Lee Rigby's killer quoted whilst killing him.
I don't doubt one day they will wipe me off social media completely, forever. They will take away my right to defend myself when I'm slandered in the press. The media will be able to tell you whatever they want about me, and I'll have no way of responding. If they can do it to me, they can do it to you. When I decided to sue the police because of the harassment of my children and many other things, my lawyer warned me things were going to get very dirty. Now that I'm suing them on multiple fronts, it's getting dirtier and dirtier. One day you won't be able to reach me on social media at all, or watch my videos on YouTube.
Behind me is the British Embassy in The Hague, and I'm here because I'm shocked and outraged. What happened in the United Kingdom last week is an absolute disgrace. Tommy Robinson, a freedom fighter and Islam critic, was jailed, while the judge issued a gag order to silence the media. Freedom of speech is being violated all over Europe and also in Britain. The lights of freedom are going out. Islam critics are taken to court, jailed or targeted with fatwas, and the authorities try to silence us. However, Islamists are pampered, protected, defended, and that is totally unacceptable. We will not accept this, never. We will continue speaking the truth about Islam and horrendous crimes like rape, genital mutilation, honor killings, and terrorism. For we protect our own people, whatever the price may be. And that is why I stand here in solidarity with Tommy Robinson. Britain used to be a bastion of freedom of speech. Today, its authorities are behaving like North Korea and Saudi Arabia. I am here on behalf of millions in the Netherlands, in Europe, and also in Britain. And in their name, I say we will no longer be silent. Our future is at stake, and we will protect it. Free Tommy Robinson. Release him from jail today. Restore freedom of speech and stop gagging the people.
understand, I'm afraid us adults just let you children down. We didn't take care of our Earth, and now you've inherited our problems.
We didn't listen!
We didn't listen!